All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get the party started. So we got our first speaker coming up. Just again, welcoming you all to Boston Talks. So who here has had a Castle Island beer? And who has not yet tasted a delightful Castle Island beer? All right, well, part of the reason may be that they're only 15 months old. They're local, right in Norwood. And we've got with us right now the guy behind it, the head brewer. And let's welcome him to the stage. He's going to tell you a little bit of the story of his life and the story of the brewery, Mr. Matt DeLuca.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. My name's Matt, head brewer at Castle Island, and I basically was going to kind of just describe how I sort of came to be the head brewer at Castle Island. I think it's kind of a somewhat interesting story, but anyways, it all kind of began back in 2003 when I turned 21 and I was going to school just outside Burlington, Vermont, which at the time, and even more so today, was really kind of, at least in New England, the craft beer mecca. There was just a ton of stuff going on up there, breweries to go visit to, and just a lot of sort of new alternative ways of selling beer that I was just really interested in. My first craft beer experience was back in high school, actually, a few years before, and my parents had a New Year's Eve party, and I remember my friend Jeff, actually, who's here in the crowd tonight, was picking me up for a Saturday night, like out with friends, and my parents had all this leftover beer on the deck, and I remember it was a cold night, and I was kind of running out to the car, and I stopped, and I saw this six-pack kind of sitting there ready for the taking, and I grabbed it, and I got in the car, and I finally figured out what it was, a Catamount Pale Ale, which, don't look for it, they don't make it anymore, but it was from the Catamount Brewing Company in Windsor, Vermont, and it was just a basic pale ale, but in 1999, that was a pretty, that was kind of a pretty far out beer for the times. Just a basic pale ale, and I remember having it later that night, and I was like, this is really incredible. You know, nothing crazy about it, but just the branding of it and the fact that it was in a brown bottle was really cool to me. So as I, spent time in Vermont, I was exposed to all this great local craft beer, and as a journalism student, I needed to come up with a senior thesis my senior year, and me and two other journalism students that I was friends with actually set out on an adventure to go interview every head brewer and owner of every brewery in the state of Vermont. This was in 2005. At the time, and I believe it still is, Vermont was per capita had the most breweries in the country. So we went to like 23 breweries that spring semester and interviewed all these really interesting people, from Magic Hat to Long Trail to Trout River to even the little tiny brew pubs down in Bennington and in Brattleboro, and really exposed me to what a great industry and tight industry it really was, while also learning a thing or two about brewing itself. We put together this 36-minute documentary. You can find it on YouTube. It's in 4 parts, and the audio doesn't work, but you can kind of get the idea. And it was really, really fun way to sort of kind of go out and sort of finish up college. Anyways, that summer I was kind of delivering pizzas and painting houses and realized that I needed to find a real job, and video journalism, as much as I wanted to get into it and continue it, I was just having trouble finding work, so I ended up home brewing and kind of just continuing to do the pizza thing, and then eventually found a job at Harpoon Brewery working on the packaging line, and ended up working there for about 9 years. During that time I learned almost everything there is to about producing beer in a commercial setting. It was pretty fast-paced, but even more so, it was very, very sort of down and dirty and very blue-collar, and kind of questioned why I was working there for $10.50 an hour, but it was really just because to be part of something unique, and it was something I loved. And in those 9 years, I kind of worked my way up and eventually left in 2015 as the senior brewer at the Boston Brewery. And it was a really great experience, and a great company to work for and with, and the culture there was incredible. So that's kind of where sort of the Castle Island thing happened. My partner, Adam Romanow, basically we were introduced by a mutual friend, and he put the business, Castle Island was his business plan. He'd been working on it for about 5 years. he came from the consulting world, probably one of the smartest guys I know, but he needed someone that actually knew how to work in a brewery, knew how to, brew the beer, because he was going to be handling all the sales and marketing and business side of things. He needed an actual brewer. So we met me, and we talked for about 2 years, sort of off and on, and over those 2 years, the conversations kind of intensified. And it turned into a job offer, and spent many long nights with my then girlfriend Rose, now my wife, like just contemplating this move, and wondering, is this worth the risk? And the answer came to me pretty quick that it was. And we opened in July, or technically, I left Harpoon in July 2015, and we opened our doors December 11th, 2015, coming out with our first beer, Candlepin, which is a hoppy session ale, and Keeper, which is what we call a New Age IPA. It was probably the most adrenaline-filled time of my life, putting together a team and trying to get this product off the ground. As a distribution-based brewery, which kind of are rare these days. A lot of it is really sort of kind of tap room and brewery-based driven business models. So to kind of come out of the gate swinging with a 30-barrel system, aiming to do 5,000 plus barrels a year was kind of setting the bar high. But luckily we've got great wholesalers working for us, and we've been able to sort of make a dent. So hopefully next time you guys are out in stores and you're in the craft beer aisle, look for the red and green Castle Island cans, and maybe whatever seasonal we have, because we're always trying to do something new. Our brewery is located in Norwood, Mass, right off Route 1. 31 Astor Ave is the actual address, but we have a tap room there where you can come and try anything you'd like that we have available. Usually we have up to 8 different beers, and you can buy merchandise and take beers home, take a tour, hang out, chat with us, and just kind of take it in and just be able to drink a beer in the actual brewery, which is cool. We kind of allow you to see the sights and smell the smells of of a commercial brewery. So if you're ever down in that area, it's a great place to stop in. But really excited to be here tonight. Kind of got a great panel, diverse panel, and was honored to be invited. So cheers, everyone.
All right, Matt DeLuca. Matt, I have questions. I have some questions for you. Very important questions. First of all, I'm impressed. I like, in my experience, I know a lot of journalists. Journalism often leads to alcoholism, but for you, journalism led to making a business of making other people alcoholics, or whatever it is, right? Which is better.
Right.
No, I'm teasing. But to that point, you are a brewer at a brewery. Like, are you drinking beer? Is it the dream job that I imagine it is? You wake up in the morning, you go to work, and you drink beer all day long.
There's certain parts of the day where I have to drink beer. And honestly, after doing this for 10 years,
like the morning and the afternoon.
I almost kind of
and the
avoid
evening.
it now. Like if I see a sample being passed around, I kind of will duck behind a fermenter and try to avoid it. But no, I mean being a brewer at a commercial brewery, I mean QC and quality control, it's very important. So making sure that you're make the product always taste good. You're always signing off on product before it gets packaged, or during fermentation, during conditioning. I mean, you have to. It's part of the job. But I have built up a little bit of a tolerance, I would think, at this point, to kind of continue to do my day-to-day things. But yeah, it's around. I mean, there's some days are tougher than others, But luckily, it hasn't become an issue yet. So.
Good. Tell me a little bit about the day-to-day. I think I have an idea in my mind of what you may be doing as a brewer, what that means. But like, really, what are you spending the most of your time during the day doing? What are you actually doing?
Yeah. Well, when we first started, it was really out on the brew house, actually brewing the beer. We were a very small team, and we still have a pretty small team. We're lean and mean, and so depending on the schedule in the week. I can be found out in the brew house, still brewing Candlepin or Keeper, whatever is on the schedule that week. But a lot of it is kind of the bigger picture things. Making sure we have the right ingredients in house, making sure inventory is up, making sure that our pilot beers or our smaller batch stuff is on schedule, designing recipes. Working with the marketing team and talking with Adam, and just basically every week there's something new that comes up outside of actually brewing the beer, whether it's recipe development. Hey, there's this account down the street that wants to do something with us. What can we do that might be unique? I mean, there's all sorts of different things that sort of comes up when working in a brewery that isn't related to beer at all, which is pretty cool. So no day is similar, every day is different, and but it's the perfect mix of sort of actual labor, hands-on work, and then desk work, and kind of being out in the trade as well. So,
real quick, take me inside recipe development a little bit, because that sounds like a really cool part of the job.
Yeah, so we've been open for 15 months, and we've actually come out with 26 beers already, and a lot of it is brewing, first of all, you'll come up with an idea or a concept or a style, essentially, and that all depends on the season, kind of what's trending, and then you sort of kind of break it down from there. And what we'll do is we'll usually, me and Adam do a lot of the recipe development, the two of us, and we'll sit down, we'll hash out like a 6-gallon recipe. We have a little mini brew house, like basically glorified homebrew kit that we can brew tiny little batches.
This is the laboratory.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
the
a little,
lab where the magic
it's basically like a
happens.
little R&D setup that we have.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we can kind of execute small batches, and if it stinks, we can dump it. Or if we like it, we can kind of do another little variation of it, and then we can actually go and scale it up to the 30-barrel system. But yeah, it's plugging in numbers. I mean, there's a lot of math involved to make sure you get the right alcohol content and you get the right color and bitterness and all that. But a lot of it is just kind of having fun, but trying to keep a Castle Island twist to it, and keep it unique and sort of relevant.
Very cool. Matt DeLuca, everybody.
Thanks,
Let's hear it
everyone.
for him. She's the co-founder and CEO of Ajiri Tea Company. And as I said, Ajiri is a Swahili word for to employ. So we're going to hear what the connection there is from the lady who's behind the tea that you see on your table. So let's give it up for Sarah Olby.
So I'm going to pass around 3 boxes of tea, or maybe Edgar will help me pass around 3 boxes of tea, just because this product, you really have to see it to understand what it is. And whoever ends up with them at the end, if you can just find me and give them back, that would be great. I'm not going to sell them again or anything, but I want to get them back. So my name is Sarah Holby, and I am the co-founder of Ajiri Tea Company. We started about 7.5 years ago. So I want to just tell you the story of Ajiri Tea, tell you some of my favorite parts of what we're doing, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end. So our goal at Ajiri, this is what we say, our goal is to create a sustainable cycle of employment and education. And our real goal is to make that cycle something that we can replicate with other products in other industries around the world in the future. But for right now, we're focusing on tea and coffee, mostly from Kenya, although this year we're starting to branch out into other products, other teas from around the world. So, as Edgar said, the word Ajiri means to employ in Swahili. And when you see our boxes of tea, you'll see that the labels are handmade by women in Kenya. We employ about 60 women to make the labels for the tea boxes by hand using dried bark from banana trees. So every single label is different. Our tea is grown on small farms in Kenya, like 1/4 acre to 2 acres of land. It's all hand-picked, and then we buy it directly from one specific cooperative of farmers. It's really great tea. I always brush over the part about the tea because it's, to me, sort of the least exciting part about what we're doing. But it's really great tea, and that's because it's all hand-picked in Kenya, so it never gets that bitter taste that a lot of teas get. And our coffee is also from Kenya, and a lot of you are probably familiar with Kenyan coffee already. And then we're set up like Newman's Own. So we're a for-profit company, but we donate 100% of our profits to our nonprofit to pay school fees for orphans. This year we have 29 students in school, in high school and in primary school total. And we have 11 students now who have graduated through our program. Out of those 11 students, our first 7 are all in university, and our 4 recent graduates are all waiting to hear from college right now. Yeah, thanks. So that's where we are. And it's been really exciting. I never, ever thought I would start a tea company. I never drank tea growing up, really, or really had any interest in tea. But I was lucky enough to study abroad in Kenya in college. And then I was really lucky to get a grant to go back to Kenya for the year after college. And I worked for a nonprofit that basically was handing out food and medicine to HIV and tuberculosis patients. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, so this was my thought process. But what happened was it was 2008, 2009, and so the financial crisis hit, and all of a sudden there were no more donations. And really overnight, this organization kind of shut down. Like every day I would sit in the office and people would come in, ask for their food and medicine, and we'd basically have to say, like, sorry that we just don't have any. And that's really where this idea of, instead of giving out handouts, really doing something to actually create employment and employ women to make money and to do with that money what they wanted. And tea started as a means to the end. So tea is Kenya's third biggest export. Nobody really knows that. But tea is a huge export in Kenya, specifically black tea. And in this region of Kenya where I was working, it's their biggest product. Tea and bananas are the two things that Kisii is sort of known for. My sister came over to visit. She was 18 and I was 22. And we literally just knocked on the gates of tea factories. Now, this isn't how you start a tea company. You don't just go to factories and ask them to sell you their tea. So basically, we ended up getting a lot of tours of factories. We knew all about tea, but nobody wanted to talk to us for more than a half-hour-long tour. But finally, we knocked on the door of one factory that was managed by a woman, Pauline, and she took us in and really taught us how tea was made and taught us how we could buy tea from her. So we were set with the tea, finally. We started working with one woman, Florence, to make the labels, and then quickly added on a group of about 25 women. So when we left in 2009, we had set up about 30 women making the labels, and we knew where our tea was coming from. But we still weren't sure what we wanted to do with our profits. We knew we didn't want to pocket all the profits, but we didn't know what to do. And the women were actually the ones who said, we'd like you to pay school fees for orphans from our community. So that's what we decided to do. And we quickly realized that we couldn't just pay school fees to school, which is the easy thing to do, right? Like you have a bank account, you transfer it to the school's bank account, you could just call it quits there. But what we really needed to do is we really focus a lot on mentoring these kids. So we have two full-time employees in Kenya, Duncan and Regina. Duncan is a social worker, and Regina is a full-time teacher who works with us part-time. And their job is to manage all the 60 women who make the labels, but more time-consuming to help all these 29 students in school. So they go to every parent-teacher conference. They take them to school on their first day. So our primary schoolers all go to their local day schools. And our secondary schoolers, we have 16 secondary schoolers this year, all go to boarding school. So whatever boarding school they've been accepted to, they go to. And that means we buy everything they need. So a mattress, a basin to hold their drinking water, toilet paper for a year. They can choose between a mop or a broom to wash the school compound. They have to bring their own mattress. The list goes on and on and on. Photocopying paper so that they can photocopy their exams, everything. So we make sure that they have all of that, and then we also make sure that they're doing well in school and really keep tabs on them as they go through school and now as they've graduated. And so my favorite part of this, my day-to-day, a lot of it is what I'm doing is selling the product, right? So talking to stores, trying to get it into the stores and trying to get it sold out of the stores. And I love that. I love working with the stores. But my favorite part is really starting to see the impact in Kenya. And now that we've been in business for almost 8 years, we're finally at a place where we really can see what's happening. So our women just started a savings program called Table Banking. And it literally means every month when they get paid, they put $5 of their pay. So our biggest women's group of 30 women does this. They put about $5 on the table. They all sit around it, and then anybody in the group can borrow that money. So if you want to borrow it, you say, I'd like to borrow some money, I want to put a new roof on my home, or I've been saving to buy a cow, but I really need another $100 to do that. And so you can borrow the money from the group, and then pay back 10% interest, which goes back to the group, and at the end of the year, all that interest gets divided amongst everybody. So I'm really excited. One of our women, Christine, just about 3 months ago, really slowed down her work with Ajiri, and we're like, what's going on? And she said, I'm too busy. I just saved up money to buy a hairdryer, and now I've opened a beauty salon. And so she's busy doing that. So those are the types of things that are really exciting. A lot of our women have built new roofs put new metal roofs on their homes instead of the straw roof, the grass roofs. They bought animals. Most of them pay for their own kids to go to school. And then with our students, I just love seeing their successes. So out of our students in university and in college, a lot of them are going for education. Alice just got into school to study special ed. Rena is studying geography to be a geography teacher. Phoenicia, one of our students, is in med school. So it's really, really exciting to see the kids who have graduated and then also to use them as role models for the younger kids in school. We just finished the selection process in February of who was going to school this year, and we'll see how they do. But so that's Ajiri. And so as I said, right now we're focused on tea and on coffee. When you look at the boxes coming around the room, you can see that all the labels are handmade by women in Kenya. Inside the box is a bead made out of magazines and a twine made out of banana tree bark. These are our brand new boxes that we haven't started selling to stores yet. So we are changing our packaging slightly. And what's cool about this is that now the customers can actually save the labels and use them for like a note card or a bookmark or something like that. And then our other new and exciting thing is that we're starting to try to get into cafes and restaurants and corporate cafeterias and places like that. So that's kind of where we are right now. Eventually we'll be huge. But for now, our goal is just to do what we say we do, Ajiri, to keep on employing women and keep on sending kids to school. So thank you.
All right, Sarah Holby. Fascinating work. So how often do you get to Kenya?
Yeah, so as I said, we started almost 8 years ago. And in the beginning, I really needed to go more often to check on things. Duncan and Regina, our two employees I talked about, are awesome. They can really manage everything on their own. So I probably go 2 or 3 times a year to just check in and to sort of check in and see how everything's going, to get some enthusiasm. For me, going back to Kenya is when I really get enthused and want to keep selling the tea. 2 or 3 times a year.
That's cool. You sort of talked in the very beginning and then mentioned again at the end, that tea was sort of a byproduct of what you were doing and that you were trying to basically, it sounds like, create a template that was replicable across like other industries, right?
Exactly.
So how are you 8 years in sort of that piece of it, in terms of whether it be what you're doing or sharing what you're doing with other people in other industries and seeing that same idea getting used?
Yeah. I like the way you're thinking about that. We haven't really talked about offering the model. I mean, of course, anyone is welcome to start this, but we haven't really talked about formalizing a way to have other companies do this. I think what we're doing a lot right now is really trying to get our brand Ajiri out there. So, we started with tea, then we moved to coffee, now getting it into restaurants and like corporate cafeterias. If you drink this every day at work, then when you go to the store, you'll see Ajiri and want to keep buying it. So getting the idea of Ajiri out there before we go into like, dried fruit from Tanzania or whatever.
Yeah. So then that leads me to my final question, which is, where can I write, like where now can I get Ajiri tea?
That is a good question. If you're lucky, you'll find a tea bag on your table. But we sell it, so we've been for a lot of our stores are small independent stores, and those are the stores that have really helped us make us who we are today. We do have it in some Whole Foods, but the smaller independent stores around here, we have it in Cambridge Naturals in Porter Square, in Olives and Grace in the South End, in Cardullo's in Harvard Square. I don't want to miss any of our really important stores, but lots of small independent health food, sort of smaller stores like that.
Can I buy it directly from you
And
online?
you can buy online. Good thinking. AjiriTea.com. You can buy online too. Yeah, and we'll ship. I or my mom or my sister, one of us will ship it straight to your door.
Sarah Holby, everybody. Let's hear it for her. All right, our next speaker. So let's welcome to the stage right now to hear about literally the biggest brew of tea ever made in Boston history, Josiah George.
Hey, how's everybody? All right. We're going to do it Boston Tea Party style. So, everybody take a fist like this, or you can keep your other hand on your beer. Yeah. Okay, now, you're going to draw it back, and on my hip, hip, you're going to throw it up in the air and shout huzzah. Ready? Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip. Yeah, that's plenty enough. All right, good. All right, that is essentially the essence of what we do. That is one of the very first things we do at the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum. Thank you for being here. My name is Josiah George, again, one of the assistant creative managers at the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum. You can find us over in the Fort Point district, the new up-and-coming, every time you turn around it looks different, Seaport district. We're right there in the middle of the Congress Street Bridge, 2 ships, you can't miss us. So to kind of understand a little bit about what it is that I do, I mean, you look at my assistant creative manager, so I create, and then I manage the creation, or at least I assist in the managing of the creation. But how many people have been to the museum? Raise your hands. Or huzzah, by a show of huzzahs, how many people have been to the museum? What? Hip, hip? Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. The rest of you come and see us out on the middle of the Congress Street Bridge. So, we begin our experience in a very first-person, engaging and immersive manner. We call our museum a revolutionary experience because we're not your standard museum in the standard sense of the word. No, we want you to experience it. So we try to make every endeavor to put you back into that night of Thursday, December 16th, 1773, in the middle of what we call a tea crisis. So you enter in one of our meeting room halls. Let me see if I can sum this up. You enter in one of our meeting room halls, and you are handed a character card. That character card is a Boston Tea Party participant. You are then referred to as Mr. Adam Colson. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Colson. Very good. Sit down. We have a lot to get to tonight. Then Mr. Samuel Adams will get up and rail against tea and taxation. And then, when you are so fired up with the huzzahs, you burst out the back of the meeting hall door. You go down to one of our 2 18th century replica vessels, and there you meet Ship Guy. That's really his name, Ship Guy. It says so on the schedule 5 years later, Ship Guy. So Ship Guy leads you in the destruction of the tea. So we have crates that you pick up, they're styrofoam, and you throw them overboard and you can re-steep the tea. We let you explore the vessel at your leisure. Then we take you inside the museum and we explain the ramifications of destroying 92,000 pounds of the king's tea. You find out what happened. But we do it in a little bit different than you might expect. So the whole first half of the museum is live and interactive. We've got the ships, it's tangible. If you're seasick, you can definitely feel it. Then you go inside and we use technology to continue telling the story. So one of the pieces of technology that we use is called Musion Eyeliner technology, holograms. Everybody remember the Tupac hologram from a few years ago? Or there was the Black Eyed Peas that were on stage. They did a set or a number, and then at the end of the number, they all disintegrated in a pile of cubes, and the crowd lost their minds. What happened? So it's the same technology. Unfortunately, we don't have Tupac and the Black Eyed Peas colonial there. But so we keep telling the story and what the ramifications were. We do, I'm glad to say, have the only surviving tea crate from the Boston Tea Party. As of a couple of years ago, it was one of only 2 surviving tea crates. The other one had, at the time, resided with the Daughters of the American Revolution in Washington, D.C. That crate is still there. They didn't drop it and break it or lose it. But they discovered they didn't really have a whole lot of provenance with it, and further curatorship of it decided that it wasn't quite true to the 18th century, late 18th century, 1773 tea crate construction, and they deemed it probably not a Boston Tea Party crate, thus leaving us with the only surviving tea crate. And that crate is really awesome. It is one of the reasons why I continue to go to work each day, and it's got a great story. It's got a great story, and how it survived is just incredible. Pieces of history, a tangible artifact as it gets passed down through the ages, and someone always wants to take a little piece of it, and then by the end of it, it's all nothing or hardly anything to it. But this piece is unique. It was picked up the very next day after the destruction of the tea by a 14-year-old boy on the flats of what is now Southie. I called it Dorchester Flats. And he took it home and he hid it under the stairs because Sons of Liberty were running around destroying remnants of crates or tea that they were finding in large quantities. They were literally bursting into taverns where large quantities of tea were found, dragging it out into the street, lighting it in fire, and then running away. So he hid it, and he went off to fight in the American Revolution. and then brought it out, and then the crate was then celebrated and passed down throughout the ages. One of the things that makes it very unique is that there is a 100-year gap where the tea was passed between a mother and a daughter. So it didn't really exchange hands for nearly 100 years, which adds to its provenance. But it's very cool, and we're very proud to display it and very humbled to display it. We have a couple of other artifacts, too. We end our experience with a great multi-sensory documentary, 12 minutes, called Let It Begin Here, which is the depiction of the ride of the Paul Revere and the battle that ensued, or the skirmish, on Lexington Green. So what we do is we tie everything all together. You join in, you hear why we're excited about the tea, what's the whole situation with the tea, then you go destroy the tea, then you find out you're in trouble for destroying the tea, and then we connect up to the American Revolution. We believe that the Boston Tea Party is the single most important event leading up to the American Revolution. So, creative manager, what do? Well, we're responsible for writing all of the scripts, costuming everyone. We interview everyone, and we've got great staff working for us. We've got teachers, history teachers. We've got stay-at-home moms. We've got a lot of actors, but they're good people. And it's the actors that show up on the comment cards over and over and over again. So we hope that we've done something right in our office if they're getting, they're getting the accolades out there for delivering this incredible history that is not only sacred to Boston, Boston proud, but the entire country. I take the train in every day, South Station, and I round there by the Federal Reserve, and I can see the masts of the Brig Beaver or the Eleanor. And I think, oh my gosh, this happened right here. And then I go in and everybody's, on their phones in the break room, saying, hey, you ready for a great day? We're going to destroy some tea. Yep, we're here. And they do. They go out there and they rail away against tea and taxation. But the event happened right there. So come and join us. Every December, we decide to team up with Old South Meeting House and put on a grand-scale reenactment in 3 parts. There's a meeting inside Old South Meeting House. We sell out 650 ticketed guests, and then about 1,000 people march from Old South Meeting House through the financial district, down to the waterfront. We have bleacher seating. It's cold. It's really cold. And then we put on the destruction of the tea, and we destroy real wooden crates filled with real East India Company tea. We have a partnership with them in London. They're all very funny about it, too. Oh, yes, you should destroy the tea once again. Good. And anyway, so come out and see us. I'll be around. I do have 6 passes if anyone's interested. And it's just a privilege to do what I do each day, and I'm glad to share it with you. Thank you.
All right, Josiah George. One thing I think is really cool. So we did a Facebook Live last week leading up to this, where I went down to the Ships and Museum, and you guys have the actual kinds of you can. There's a tea room, and you can go get tea, the actual kinds of tea that were destroyed during the Tea Party.
Oh yeah, we say you can taste history, literally. So
that's kind of gross.
At the end of the tour, you come
cool.
upstairs in our Abigail's Tea Room, which is lovely views. But we have on display and for a sampling all the 5 types of teas that were thrown over during the Boston Tea Party. 3 black teas, 2 green teas.
I just have to ask, how do you get the job that you have? Like, how do you end up with that job?
Well, Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum is part of a larger company called Historic Tours of America. We operate sightseeing tours and attractions in 7 different cities around the country. Orange and green trolleys, Old Town Trolley in Boston. Yeah, that's us. Ghosts and Gravestones. Everybody been on a Ghosts and Gravestones? Yeah, woo. Was it me? Was it me? No, you don't remember? All right. I did it for 6 years, and I met my friends and colleagues that I work with alongside now. And we got together. He called me up, said, hey, you want to come help me build this? And I said, are you kidding me? This is it. This is the thing. Yeah.
Very cool. Josiah George, everybody. Let's hear it for him. And now we talk music and beer and brews. Adam Ritchie, come on up. Let's hear it for Adam Ritchie. For Adam Ritchie.
Thank you very much. I think they asked me to go on last because musicians are used to staying up a little bit later. And we always want to thank everybody for sticking around before we go on, usually at about 1 in the morning. So raise your hand if in the last 2 weeks you've gone to a record store to buy a brand new album from a band you haven't heard of before. Okay, now raise your hand if in the last 2 weeks you've gone to a beer store to find some beer, maybe for a Friday or Saturday night, and been open to what's new on the shelf. All right. So that's what it's like being in a band today and making new music. It's rough. So the Lights Out have been a band for about 10 years. We rehearsed on the other side of this building in a complex called the Sound Museum. And we were writing our 4th album. It was all written over there and recorded down the street at a studio called Mad Oak. And we were discussing, how are we going to release this thing? We could put out a CD. We could just do it digitally. We could do a vinyl record. And meanwhile, this entire pile of empty beer cans and bottles was staring at us from the corner of the room. We're a beer band. We drink a lot of beer. When we go on tour, we always make a point to visit the breweries. And beer and rock just go really well together. So we said, what if we put it out on that? And we said, well, has anyone ever done that before? Why hasn't anybody done that before? Like, well, why not? So this album, we're a band that every song we write is a report back from a parallel reality. Every song is either a story or a character that we've met as we travel through parallel universes. And the album was going to be called Trip, which is short for The Reckonings in Pandimensionality. Are you with me so far? Okay. So the brewery we went to was Aeronaut, and they're up in Somerville. And they were founded by MIT and Cornell scientists. So when we went to them and we said, we'd like to put out our next album on your beer can, and it's about parallel universes and every decision you make branching off into another reality, the founder said, oh, you mean like the multiverse? Yep. And that's how it got started. So we gave them a rough mix of the album, and they said, well, what kind of beer were you guys thinking, And we said, well, the nice thing about bringing your album to a brewer instead of to a record label is the brewer isn't going to say, that song's pretty good, but why don't you make it about 2 minutes shorter or change the chorus just a little bit? So we said, if you're not going to tell us what to do with the music, we're not going to tell you what to do with the beer, and let's just both do what we do best and trust each other to get it right. So 6 months later-ish, this beer was created, and it's a style of beer that was inspired. They listened to the music while they were brewing it, and they created this thing that's an imperial session beer, which if you know about beer and brewing, that's a style that's impossible. It shouldn't exist because imperial means really high in alcohol. Session means pretty low in alcohol. You can drink it all day. And what they created with this, with Galaxy hops from Australia, of course, was the world's first imperial session beer, and it's a paradox in a can. And if you believe in infinity and the multiverse and that anything out there is possible, then this beer can exist. We're really lucky that this worked out because in pretty much every reality I can think of, this didn't happen. So you guys are living in the right one. We were talking about the artwork for the label, and in about the amount of time it takes to drink a beer, their can artist, Raul Gonzalez, sketched this out on a cocktail napkin. And this is us. Our drummer invented a wearable light show that synchronized with all of our music. And we wear goggles and have LEDs. It's about 1,000 LEDs across our faces and our instruments. So when we sing about a sunrise, you see a sunrise blooming across our bodies. And if someone takes a guitar solo, you'll see them light up like a supernova. So on the label here, you have us, which is this pan-dimensional traveler character. And you have this ship flying through this wormhole between realities. And that's our color machine that takes us in the darkness between realities. So when we launched this thing, it was on November 12th, which was the week of the election. which if you're in, product marketing or journalism or anything, that was pretty much the worst time to ever launch a product. You're right before Thanksgiving, you're right before Christmas and New Year's, it's election, and then you've got Super Bowl, like running right up against that. It's like bam, 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 bam. And surprisingly, people cared, and they took notice, and it caught the attention of Men's Journal and the AV Club and Food and Wine magazine and Adweek, and every music and food or geek culture outlet was interested in this thing, and consumers really liked it too. The idea was for people to discover this album on the beer shelf. So when they walk into the beer store, they go, wow, what's that? And if you get the label, it says, tweet at this hashtag to get this album. This is an experiment. So when you tweet, and we have a special one tonight right now for Boston Talks, if you tweet to @TheLightsOut, all one word, and Aeronaut Brewing, the hashtag TRIPME, TRIPME, all one word, will tell you what an alternate version of yourself is doing right now in a parallel universe and give you a link to the album. So that's how people got it. We'd released albums before, Aeronaut had released beers before, but we got to see what it's like to release a beer for the first time, and they got to see what it's like to release a record. And we had both of our fans going to beer stores, finding this almost like a treasure hunt, and tweeting this hashtag. And we're very proud of how it went because we feel like we brought back something that's been lost in the way people discover music. There just isn't that sensory layer to it anymore. And it used to be like a quest. You'd go to the music store, you'd find that album, you'd be like, oh, well, that one looks interesting, I might pick that up too, just based on the cover. And the next thing you know, you're into a new band. And that's gone now. With digital discovery, it has all the excitement of dragging and dropping a gallon of milk onto your online grocery order. It sucks. It's easy, it's there, and it's got everything, but there's no thrill of anticipation, there's no quest. And when you get a beer, you got to put your shoes on and hit the street and go down to a store and show proof of something to some person at a register. There's this whole process. And there's that thrill and that anticipation as you're walking home with this in the bag and you go, I wonder what that's going to taste like. And now, we give you something you can listen to when you do that at the same time. So that's how Trip, the first album in the history of beer or music ever released on a beer can, came to be. And thanks for your attention.
All right, Adam Ritchie. 2 questions.
I brought one for you, Edgar.
That's
You got to drink that on
tremendous.
stage right now. No pressure.
Whew. Well, I was going
The
to
whole
ask,
thing.
is the beer any good?
It's
In
like
a
nothing you've ever
parallel
tasted
universe?
before.
Really?
It's actually a
Should I
great
try
beer.
it?
We love it, yeah.
Should I try it?
It even sounds good. The album just came out when he cracked it.
Yeah. I can smell the music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very grassy. Does it taste like a parallel universe?
It does. It tastes like me in a parallel universe. This is incredible. This is good.
Thank you very
This is
much.
really good.
One of the unexpected things is when you hand someone a beer with instructions on it, and it happens to be a 7.5% alcohol beer, they don't always type the instructions quite right. And those were some of the most fun tweets we got.
I can imagine. How did it? I mean, you talk about the. You talk about, you got picked up in a lot of places and stuff like that. In general, though, do you feel like, I mean, it strikes me that you're doing this, it's a fun idea. And, your music, you talk about you have an LED light show, you're into the whole experiential thing. It's beyond just simply the music. And yet, at the end of the day, I'm assuming you're proud of the product that you're putting out. You're proud of your music, and this is fun and it's experiment, but it's also like, can we get our music to people? Did that piece happen? Did people find their way to the music, download the album? Did you build new fans?
Yeah, that was the idea. Seeing these complete strangers going, wow, I love this experiment, and tweeting at you, and then that's how it all works. One of our favorite articles was one that talked about this beer can and this experiment, but then they had a little aside and they said, just so you guys know, the music, he said, this album flat out rules, and then reviewed the record. And that's the idea, is, it's all a means of getting into people's hands and helping them discover the music.
So does part of you go like, okay, have our LED light show. We've now put this out on a beer can. Your next album, are you like, we got to do something?
It's
now.
gonna be on a
It's just-
bag
we
of
can't just put
weed.
a record out
Definitely weed.
and put it out on weed. Well, I mean, legalize marijuana.
Well, that's the idea. We're following prohibition as it
yeah.
goes. And
Very
as things
nice.
become legalized, that's when the next Lights Out record will happen.
Let's say I'm here and I'm hearing you talk, and I'm like, gosh, I really want to hear the music. Now, you said this is your 4th record. Where do I get in general, other than the beer can, other than tweeting? Where do I find your music? Where do I see you guys? You play locally. What's the story?
Everything's on thelightsout.com, and our next show is at Thunder Road on April 1st, and that's up in Union Square. And we will be wearing the interactive LED light show for you all and playing a lot of the songs on this record and some new ones, too.
Adam Ritchie, everybody. Let's hear it for him.
Thank you.
Folks, this is your chance right now. So anybody got a question? Burning question that they want to ask? Really, really want to ask? What's your name?
My name is Brian. I'm from Duxbury, Massachusetts. Do it, Brian. All right, Josiah. How do you, not to be cynical, but how do you trace the lineage of that one remaining crate, the Holy Grail that you guys have at your? How do you know the kid hid it under the stairs and so on?
All right, so
Challenge.
yeah. Oh, dun-dun-dun.
This
All right,
is
so
a
it's
challenging
all
audience.
family word of mouth going back a generation, back and back and back. And so what you have is a family that contacted Historic Tours and said, so we have this crate, and the kids are all grown and everyone's grown, and they explain what they did with it, and then they have a whole bunch of history. And like I said, there's a 100-year gap or a 100-year span of time between a mother and a daughter, and so it didn't go anywhere. So they've got that history. And then the daughter has her prehistory. And so they actually have these letters. And then back in like 1887, there was a deposition taken as to where the crate originated from and the story and the word of mouth. So, with people standing around and lawyers and whatever, and there's a deposition taken, say this is a true factual history of it. And all of the family lineage lines up. I don't know if anybody gets into genealogy, everybody, that's kind of resurgence. But it's cool. You can track it back. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
So, okay, there's another question. Can you carbon date it? We did have the crate forensically tested. They had determined that it was 18th century wood, late 18th century wood, that the crate had been submerged in seawater. All of the various, you don't want to destroy the box, but a couple of locations, and it had been submerged in ocean water over a period of time. Yeah. Where the tea came from? East India Tea Company, but the tea was from China. Mm-hmm. Tea was from China. Mm-hmm.
So you had
good
mentioned Josiah, you had mentioned the number, the sort of the tonnage of tea that had been dropped. Do we have a sense in kind of generally in today's figures how much money worth of tea we were talking about? Like in terms of how
Sure.
big of a destruction that was?
Obviously money fluctuates throughout the ages, but essentially between $1.5 million and $2 million in today's currency.
Worth of tea.
And that is 46 tons or 92,000 pounds or over 18 million cups of tea.
Would the harbor have actually tasted like salty tea? Like, did it like brew in the harbor?
So, I mean, there are accounts where they're seeing debris in the following days. There were articles written where people speculated, saying, "Well, now the fish are going to be affected in the harbor by the tea, so don't."
They're going to be eating crumpets.
But no, there was no evidence that people had a flounder and they were like, "Whoa, this is no."
All right, we got a question over here. What's your name?
I'm Cheryl from the north end of Boston.
Cheryl, what do you got?
So I admire all of you. I think that you're doing amazing jobs, and I'm just thinking that.
But
Well, here's my question.
I'm kidding.
So you all have jobs that I think if I told my parents I was doing any one of these jobs, like when I was in college, they would have said, "Oh no, what are you thinking?" And so I admire you that you kept going, and I'm wondering, when or did you have to take that leap of faith from like a day job that was more traditional? And when did you know it was the right thing to do to jump to the jobs that you're doing now?
Well, that just got real. Everybody, everybody take a turn answering. Yeah. Give your
Yeah.
basic.
Well, music doesn't pay very well when nobody's buying it. So everyone in this band has a day job, and a lot of us own our own businesses. So it creates the flexibility that we need to be in a band and to pull late hours and to go on the road sometimes. So we never had to do that thing, and you don't have to do that thing. And we kind of pride ourselves on, making both work.
I come from a theater background, professional stage management in theater and opera and production work. I had actually moved up here in 2001, and then in 2009, after a professional theater career, I decided to move my family closer to the grandparents. But during that 9-month sabbatical that I was away from New England, my now partner and colleague called me up and said, hey, I got this job. I want somebody to help me build it. And so, my whole life I thought, or my whole theater career, I thought, I'm going to do that thing. There's going to be that thing that you do that is so important in your life, whether it's just a collaboration. I thought it was going to be a show, maybe a headliner, or maybe Broadway. Oh, no, never been in Broadway. But it was this, and, I couldn't say no, so.
I went straight from college to basically volunteering in Kenya for a year to doing this, so I didn't have to ever make a leap of faith. But back to your question of, do your parents think you're, crazy? I couldn't do this without my parents. So the company is myself and my sister, but that being said, my mom does this full-time behind the scenes, and my dad, while he has a full-time job, is spending this weekend selling tea with us in Brooklyn. So it's everybody we know has to get involved to make this work.
Yeah, kind of like Sarah. I fell into craft brewing kind of right out of college. There was that in between year where I was painting houses and delivering pizzas. But my parents, they were my age at one point, and I think they kind of realized, he'll work it out, he'll figure something out. But they knew I was kind of a creative person, and as long as I could pay the bills and be responsible, they honestly really didn't care, which way I went, as long as that I could sustain myself and make them proud. And I still don't really think they fully understand craft beer, but they definitely kind of get it at this, enough where they are proud, and it's something to tell their friends and their my aunts and uncles about, and they've been very supportive. So in a sense, I've been very lucky, and I think it's just, I think that's just a testament to craft beer now. I think it's just it's such a kind of at the forefront, and it's becoming very popular, and there's a reason why, there's, I think the stat is 3 breweries open every day in the United States. So yeah, it's it wasn't too hard for me. So yeah, hope all these answers answer your question.
Nice, good question. We got one final question from a couple of our Boston Talk super fans over here. What is your name?
Kelsey.
Kelsey, what do you got?
This question is for Adam. I was wondering how the brewery thought that your collaboration worked out, and if it was something that they were maybe interested in continuing, or even for the Newcastle Brewery, if you maybe thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, well, they were really, to their credit, when we ran this by them, we said, this has the potential to get a lot of attention, and they said, whatever, we don't care. We just want to put out an album on this beer. And we want to brew a beer for this album. This is like a science project to us. This is an experiment. And we said, great. So anything that happened after that was all just gravy. And it happened to be great. And they happened to get a lot of attention from it and be very excited about it. We released it at a climbing gym, Brooklyn Boulders. And we dropped our singer, Rish, who's here up front, 50 feet from the ceiling, all lit up to start the show. And the CEO of Aeronaut was there taking pictures, and he was our photographer for the night. Those guys really do it all. So yeah, we're going to extend it, and they're in the process of coming up with a tweak on the recipe and possibly doing another batch pretty soon. So we're going to, as long as they keep brewing this beer, we'll keep offering the album on it.
All right, thanks everybody. I poorly timed putting a cookie in my mouth right there. as you were finishing up, I was like, I'll just eat this bite of cookie. Now it's in my mouth. Sorry, guys. And let's hear it one more time for all of our speakers. And thank you guys for coming out for Boston Talks. Safe. Thanks again. And have a great night.
So my particular position and what I now have dedicated my career to is how do we eradicate the need for health food and everything else?